I've gotten negative feedback throughout all parts of my career, and a lot of it has really changed how I approach commentating esports because... Hello, this is episode 10 of WCG Close-up. My name is Wolf, and I want to talk today about something that I get asked almost every single day. Hey Wolf, I want to be a caster. How do I start? And it's a very complicated question to answer because the way I became a caster is very different from how people become a caster today. I've been commentating esports since 2010, moved to Korea to commentate professionally in 2011, and I started, like many of you might, in my bedroom, and I wanted to commentate esports really badly. It was a growing industry at the time. Mostly not live, actually, mostly on YouTube. And I decided that I was going to make a tournament because it was the only way I could find a way to cast because no one wanted to give me a chance to cast. So I created a tournament called the Open Wolf Cup. You can Google it, you can look it up. But it was a tournament series I ran very frequently. I had a few players I invited, but it was mostly just an open tournament anyone could play in. And I started commentating it. And it didn't get a lot of traction at first. Not a lot of people watched it. It was during the beta of the StarCraft 2 where I started it, so there was some attention around StarCraft 2 around that time. And watching people play anything they could. People wanted to just watch StarCraft. I did it alone. I broadcast by myself for the most part. And then later on, I was given an opportunity to cast a lot of small online events. And I built a portfolio. I ended up broadcasting a lot until Film TV was asking for casters to cast their kind of B-tier tournament called Code A. And I applied, and I got the gig, and I moved to Korea, and I've been here ever since. And that's a very truncated TLDR on my personal experience. But the reason I mention it is because everybody's going to have a similar and very difficult road to get there. And I didn't list all the hard parts and the hardships, but we'll get into that in a minute. But I went from being a guy who was in university, not knowing what I wanted to do with my life, to being a guy who actually is able to travel around the world to commentate esports. So let's talk about some of the basics that you're going to need if you want to become a caster. And before we get into equipment, let's talk about your personal situation. Do you live with your parents? Are you stable financially? Do you actually have a job? Are you in school? How much free time do you have is really what this boils down to. Because if you're in a situation where you're not able to commentate regularly, then you're going to really struggle to actually become a commentator. If you have a full-time job, that means that you have the finances to actually become a commentator. Maybe you can work at esports events at night, for example, and you'll have the finances to actually fund the equipment you're going to need. On the other side of that, you're actually not going to have a lot of time, but if you can figure out a way to work your work schedule or your school schedule together with the kind of time commitment you're going to need to commentate, then you're in a pretty good spot. That's actually kind of the sweet spot. If you're not working and you're struggling, or if you're in between jobs, it's very tempting to start trying to be a commentator because you feel like, well, I've got nothing else going on. But if you're not in a place where you can take care of yourself financially, I don't recommend that you start trying to commentate esports because the path to making money is often a very, very long one. Multiple years most people have to go through before they end up making any real money. Now we can talk about equipment. What you're going to need is, first and foremost, of course, a pretty powerful computer. It doesn't have to be the top of the line. You don't need the best graphics card, but you will need a computer that has a decent graphics card. You're going to want to be able to run the game that you're commentating, or at least streams of the games that you're commentating at a really high resolution with good graphics. So you're going to need a good graphics card, but you're really going to need a strong processor because a lot of the streaming equipment that you're going to need, your streaming platform that you're going to use, is going to require a lot of CPU. Like OBS, for example, eats a lot of that. So make sure you have a good processor. And generally speaking, if we're talking about the real basics, you're probably going to want to have at least 2 monitors, because if you have one monitor to watch the game, you need a second monitor to monitor, no pun intended, what you're showing on the screen. How much of the game is being shown, are your overlays working correctly? You might want to be able to monitor Twitch chat, for example. I highly recommend having 2 monitors if you're going to try to start streaming. Now, we get into some of the less obvious things. You're going to need to get a camera. That's the most important thing. And it's probably going to have to be better than the one that I'm using right now. I'm using a Logitech camera right now. It's a webcam. It's good enough for amateur casting and amateur streaming, but you're probably going to want something better in the long term. If you've got the money for it, I'd say go for it. I actually have better cameras, but I'm using them for other stuff right now, so it's not hooked up at the moment. But you're going to need a good camera. More important than the camera is actually what's behind the camera oftentimes. If you want to be taken seriously as a broadcaster, try to invest in getting a green screen. Put a green screen behind you, then your background could be literally whatever you want it to be. Even a green screen oftentimes looks better than what's behind me if you're trying to be taken seriously as a commentator, even for amateur events. You don't want to have a bed in your background. You don't want to have clothes on your bed in the background. I mention this because I see this all the time when I see a new esport coming through, or even someone trying to broadcast kind of the esports of speedrunning, for example. Commentator will have a great voice, great knowledge of the game, and you look at his camera, and I can see his underwear in the background on the bed. Don't be that guy. The next thing, which is arguably the most important, is to invest in a good microphone. Don't ever use a headset mic. Don't use your camera's built-in microphone. Try to get a good microphone. A Snowball is one of the easiest ones you can get that's pretty affordable. It's what I used to use a long time ago. If you get a stand for your mic like this one, then it's going to make it a lot easier because you can use your hands while you're talking, and your microphone is always exactly where it needs to be in front of your mouth. Ideally, if you really have the money to buy one, if you get a sports broadcaster headset like the Sennheisers you see a lot of esports commentators using, that's the best. That's the most ideal. It's not good for gaming, so that's why I don't have it hooked up to my computer right now, but I think it is by far the best one that you can get, and it will feel amazing when you use it. And then, the next thing that you're going to need is to download a program like OBS. I think OBS is the easiest one that you can use. There's a lot of alternatives out there. Streamlabs OBS is also fine. And what you're going to want to do is look up guides, how to figure out the best way to set up what your overlays look like. Because when you start casting by yourself, especially when you start doing amateur tournaments, you're not going to have the tournament organizer sending you files, showing you how it's going to look. He's not going to help you set up your cast. You're going to have to do a lot of that yourself. So the easiest way to do that is load up a game and start moving your camera around, moving things around on the screen within OBS, for example, and figuring out what you think the best way that your game that you're commentating is going to be advanced by the setup that you have. You can even download some of the programs that are available to put a score overlay, for example, at the top, so you can see this team versus that team, or this player versus that player, what their points are. There's a lot of great tools online that you can find by Googling based on your esport. The best time to start casting an esport is right when a game comes out, because that's when everybody wants to cast, and it is going to be extremely competitive. That's where you can make a big difference and be like, my product is different, my product is better. But before you get gigs and before you start actually commentating tournaments, what you probably want to do, as awkward as this often is practice casting. And I think for a lot of people, they feel like they have to have a partner right away to start casting, and that's not true. You can commentate by yourself. And you also don't have to decide if you want to be a play-by-play caster or a color commentator. Play-by-play being the one who calls the action, usually what I like to call the yelly guy, who yells during team fights or screams about banelings crashing into Marines. And then the color commentator is the one who, after the yelling or before the yelling, explains what was about to happen or why what has already happened, and what he thinks the players or she thinks the players are planning to do next, what's going through their minds, right? Player history, that kind of stuff. And you're going to find that it's very challenging to commentate. It's extremely challenging to commentate alone. And when you know no one is listening, it's very, very awkward, even as a new commentator who's never done it before. But you've got to practice and iterate and get yourself into the rhythms of how you want to commentate. You can also study what other commentators are doing in the game that you're trying to commentate right now and try to emulate certain aspects of their commentary, their cadence, their speaking levels, their speed at which they're speaking, how they explain things, what things they focus on. Get some experience, get some ideas together before you decide, okay, I'm going to commit, I'm going to contact this tournament, I'm going to say, I want to cast your game. That's the next step. Don't wait for somebody to contact you. Don't wait for a job posting. Start contacting tournaments. Say, for example, you see open tournament for Overwatch that's out there. Maybe it's on like challenge.com. It's not even necessarily open division. It's not a major tournament. You can very easily reach out to people playing in that tournament and say, can I spectate your game? I want to commentate on my stream. And for a lot of players, low-level players who are playing in tournaments like that, they love to hear that somebody wants to commentate their game. Because what was just a small, round of 64 bracket match for them, now is suddenly being streamed. They don't know how many people are going to watch it, even if you get 2 viewers while you're practicing casting. Reach out to people, ask players if you can commentate them, and just start doing it. That's how you're going to start in most cases. In most cases, you're not going to contact some guy or get in through a friend of a friend who knows the guy who's running open division, and he's going to give you your big moment, and you're going to get paid right away because you practiced a lot by yourself. That's not going to happen in most cases. Yes, some people do get lucky. In fact, a lot of people get lucky in esports. But how you really want to start is by actually contacting players, contacting small tournaments where there's almost zero chance they can say no. Like, why would they ever block you from commentating it? And start commentating low-level games of whatever your esport is, be it Overwatch, Smash Bros, StarCraft, Valorant, League of Legends, and start practicing commentating, because the practice you put in that step I mentioned just a moment before, you're going to feel it when you start casting, and suddenly you're going to get this really tingly feeling of like, wow, like 5 people are watching me do this. This is no longer me just doing this in my room. I've turned the stream on and people are watching. And then you're going to start getting feedback from people. I really liked what you did here. Ooh, I like your voice. Or I think you need to work on this. Or your overlay is blocking the supply of the Terran player. I can't see how much supply he has. Can you move that? You're going to get a lot of feedback really fast once you start actually commentating these sorts of small events. That's how you grow and become a commentator. What's going to happen after you do a few of these small tournaments is one of 2 things. And for a lot of people, it's the first one. It's the former, which is that you're going to quit because you decided you didn't get enough viewers, not enough people noticed you, or you're spending too much time doing this. It's detracting from your real life, your real life obligations. Maybe your wife is like, you're not spending time with me anymore because every time you come home from work, you're working on esports or something like that. That happens to a lot of people, especially the older you are, the more responsibilities you have. A lot of people who try to become a commentator at this step drop out because they go, well, I don't know, I did open division tournaments 4 times this week and only had 20 viewers and nobody knows who I am. And if at that moment you feel like you aren't going to make it, then it's okay to drop out and say, well, maybe this isn't for me. And that's actually fine. But if you actually feel at that moment that maybe this isn't for me, then it probably definitely isn't. Because most people have to do that for years before anyone really knows who they are. Unless they get lucky, get a big break, some crazy Twitch clip gets posted on Reddit, and they explode. But that's not how it works for everybody. And if at any moment you feel like, wow, this is just too much for me, it's okay to step away at this point and go, you know what, maybe it wasn't for you. And that's why I said at the beginning, make sure you're in a financial place to where this is kind of a hobby for you at first and we'll see where it goes, instead of just going, all right, I'm dropping out of school, I'm going to get some OBS overlays, I'm going to buy a microphone, and this is where we're going. Don't do that. Because most people make it as far as casting a few tournaments online, and then they walk away. But what happens if you don't walk away? What happens if you keep fighting? What happens if you keep trying? Is you're going to eventually build a portfolio. Once you commentate a few of those events, well, let's not even say events. Once you commentate a few of those very small amateur tournaments, could even be like Gold League players, and you start to really get a good feel for the casting, you might have somebody who says, hey, I really want to cast with you. You might get a partner. You don't necessarily have to, but you might. You might then go, well, now I have something I can show some of these bigger tournaments, some of these tournaments that are actually for a little bit of money, maybe a $50 cup, or maybe a feeder tournament into an open division, or a contenders type tournament, or something like a challengers tournament. When you get to that point, you've got a little bit of a resume to show, like, yes, I cast these Gold League players, but this is my skill. Will you allow me to do this? And then you kind of go from there. You have to build a portfolio, you have to build a resume of casting to show people. When somebody says, I'm looking for casters, you can't just go, I want to go, and they'll just go, cool, good username, I like that. You know, I want to cast this. Look at what I've done. This is what my casting style is. These are some clips of my casting. These are some tournaments I've commentated. Show them a list. But anyway, if you stay with it, build that portfolio, that's how you're going to finally become someone, if you're lucky enough and if you work hard enough and if you don't quit, who can do almost a real tournament for money. And I know that's very complicated, and it sounds like, well, what if I don't make it? Because there's going to be, in a new game, 50 to 200 more people just like you out there trying to do the exact same thing. Because this is a new growing industry, and it seems really easy to just dive in and do it. But it's not. And I think for some people, they're okay with doing it for fun, as a hobby. And that's actually awesome. I actually really respect people who do esports commentary for fun. And if you decide that you want to try to make it a real thing, like, you've got to go all the way. You've got to work really hard. You've got to send emails to companies. You've got to try to put your resume, in. You've got to actually try to prove why you're worthy. The last thing I want to talk about is how to deal with people putting you down on your path to becoming a caster, because there will be people who say you have a bad voice, or people who say, I don't really like his style, or I think he repeats phrases a lot, or it's very clear he's very new, or, oh, this guy's microphone sounds like he's casting through a tin can. There will always be feedback like that, especially when you're starting off, when you're really working hard to try to become a commentator. And always take feedback like that with a grain of salt. But every negative comment that you get as a commentator has a shade of someone's opinion in it, right? And so if enough people are telling you that your microphone sounds bad, instead of getting angry about it, you should probably improve your microphone. Don't get discouraged by negative feedback. Use it to grow, and use it to actually figure out what parts of your commentary you can improve on. Because a lot of people, when I talk about that split where you quit or you keep going, a lot of people at that point aren't changing or aren't improving fast enough, and they're trying to figure out, how can I be better? And when people tell you things you're doing well, of course, keep doing that, and you're doing that part great. But the things that people say you should improve on, invest in improving on it, because that's how you can grow. Myself as a commentator, I'm no saint. I mean, I've gotten negative feedback throughout all parts of my career, and a lot of it has really changed how I approach commentating esports, because at some points when I was a lot younger, I thought I had it kind of figured out, but I was definitely wrong. Everyone can grow, everyone can improve. Thank you guys so much for watching WCG Close-up Episode 10. It was a lot of fun talking to you guys about some of the struggles you have to go through, and some of the processes, kind of the order of what you need to do in order to start getting noticed as a new caster. But that's basically it. I mean, it sounds simple, but at the same time, a lot of people don't know how to do this. I get this all the time. So how do I just be a caster? Well, get a camera, get a microphone, turn on the computer, find some low-level tournaments, and give it a shot. I hope to see some of you guys as budding, growing casters in the future. Again, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video.